Welcome to all those attending tonight. So just beginning a bit of deja vu, except this time round, as you can see, we're in the workplace and we've masked up for this presentation. So hopefully you can still hear us quite clearly. For those that don't know me, my name's David Evers. I'm Managing Director here at ViceCo. And to my right, I'm joined by Steve Walker, who is our in-house specialist in respect of these COVID packages. Now, I think it's fair to say that all of us didn't really want to be here again, but with the extension of the lockdown, we thought it was important to get information out there to the wider community as quickly as we could. Some of the information is not complete as yet. It's a bit like we were at last time, where there's some gaps and they are being plugged effectively by press release. So effectively, we will do our best to plug those gaps for you. My role today is facilitator and just helping Steve with some of the answers. In terms of our timing, we've originally allocated half an hour. I do suspect that we will go over that half an hour time, and I'm not sure I'll have a whole lot of spare time to actually answer questions as we go through the presentation. I've just had a message from Sally saying the sound is terrible. I've hopefully cleared that up a little bit, but from the team, perhaps Sarah, if you could let me know if you're getting the sound okay, that would be appreciated. We are working with mics and our test case was okay, so with a bit of luck, we'll do our very best. So we might get started. If you do raise questions as you're going through, I'll do my level best to answer those during the time. If they are unanswered by the end of proceedings, then what we will do is that we will get back to you in the next 24 hours in respect of those questions. So, excellent. So, some raised hands here, but what I might do is keep pushing on here for a moment and then we will get back to where we need to. So moving forward, my name, as I said, is David Evers. I won't spend too much time in respect of this. Unfortunately, we are experienced in these webinars and providing information as quickly as we could. And hopefully we don't have to do too many more of them. As I mentioned, Steve is our key expert in all matters relating to COVID relief, is an experienced auditor and effectively knows the ins and outs of the legislation and is particularly experienced in dealing with press releases as they come out and communicating those messages to our clients. Now, a little bit about our firm. For those that aren't working with us, we are basically a comprehensive advice firm. I won't spend a lot of time focusing on this because we do want to get to the key component. For those that aren't already working with us or aren't already getting support in terms of dealing with some of the issues that are arising from the COVID lockdowns that we're currently experiencing, you will have the opportunity following this presentation to mention and seek some support, and we're happy to help out in that space. Now, what we're talking about here tonight, and obviously we prefer not to be talking about these issues currently, but we are facing what we are, and it appears that it's getting worse rather than better, and it may well spread to other states. Tonight's presentation is focusing primarily on New South Wales, and I won't comment on other material and other support that may be available in other states, but we will cover off on, firstly, the government grants. We'll then deal with how we're some of the areas of micro business support, which is a bit different to what we've seen in the past. We'll deal with the COVID disaster payments, the JobSaver payments, talk a little bit about the payroll tax concessions, and touch on what rent and land tax relief that's currently available, and also give you an update as to what some of the banks have already come out and said. So without further ado, and conscious of time, I might ask Steve to start talking through some of the key issues that we've got with the New South Wales State Government grants. Steve.
Okay, well, the primary grant that was announced originally was a grant of $5,000 to $10,000, which was subsequently increased to $7,500 through to $15,000, available for eligible businesses depending on their level of decline in turnover over a 2-week period. And that 2-week period can be anywhere between the 26th of June and the 17th of July. That 17th of July date has only just been inserted into the regulations up until 2 days ago. It was up until the end of July. The reason that we believe that they have inserted that date is because from the 18th of July, other benefits come into play. This particular grant was designed to cover the first 3 weeks of lockdown. From week 4, there is payroll support. Throughout this document, you'll see that there are several references to web pages. That's going to be in the document that you'll be able to access at the end of the webinar, and I do recommend that you keep yourself up to date with these because, as David has said, they're changing on a daily basis.
Yeah, there has been a fair degree of trouble with people registering on the state site. So if you haven't had the opportunity to at the moment, we would suggest that you do so. And as Steve's alluded to, changes are happening quite frequently. So, Steve, with this business grant, tell us more.
Okay, the business grant, there are 3 levels of grant that can be obtained depending on the level of decline in turnover you get. So if your turnover is 30% or more, but less than 50%, you're entitled to a $7,500 grant. 50 to 70%, $10,500, and more than 70% in decline in turnover, that is a $15,000 grant. Now, I did say the dates are 26th of June through to the 17th of July. There are some exceptions to that in relation to businesses and not-for-profits that were on the Victorian border that copped basically the Victorian last lockdown, so that extended the period that's available for them.
Now, Steve, it's fair to say this initial grant was a once-up payment.
It is a once-up payment, and there are subsequent grants of a different nature coming through for other people. To be eligible for it, you have to have an ABN. You have to demonstrate that your business is operating in New South Wales and have Australian wages of less than 10 million and an aggregated turnover of between 75,000 and 50 million for the year ended 30th June 2020. You've also got to have costs that relate to your business that no other government support is available. So if you're receiving support in a different realm, you aren't eligible for this grant. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're receiving a grant that covers certain costs, but not all of them, you wouldn't receive it. It'd only be if all your costs were covered off in those grants. One of the new things which only came in last weekend was that you have to maintain your employee headcount as at the 13th of July. A lot of businesses had already laid off staff, and it was unfair to backdate the headcount number before that, so they announced it on the 14th of July based on last Friday's staff numbers.
Yeah, so that's of last Friday. Yes. So if businesses had already made some changes on the back end of what they were facing, that would have been, that should have already been reflected in those payroll numbers.
Absolutely.
I've also had a question from Paula, just confirming, so this initial grant was absolutely for the businesses that had a turnover of more than 75,000?
It was. It's for between 75 and 50 million.
Yeah, so for other small businesses, we will cover off on that a little bit more later, Paula, about how they can be supported.
In fact, it's the next page.
There we go.
A micro business grant for businesses with a turnover of between 30 and 75,000. They'll get $1,500 a fortnight. Again, there has to be a 30% or more decline in business, and it's for businesses where the primary source of income is it is the primary source of income for an individual. So you're talking about sole traders or small businesses that have a trusting arrangement that has a low turnover level. This one isn't available as yet. Applications open towards the end of the month. We don't know the exact date. Again, that link, that get notified about financial support, will take you to a page where you can register for being updated by the Office of State, or Service New South Wales now, I call it the Office of State Revenue, but it's gone through many incarnations over the years. So that's what you're going to have to do. One of the things about all of the grants that we're talking about today is that primarily it is the business that has to interact with government. In the last lot of grants with JobKeeper and those sort of things, it was actually a case of the business or the tax agent could do it. This time around, it's far more emphasis on the business negotiating with the relevant government departments.
Thank you, Steve. Now we've covered off. There's some questions which have come through about will there be different dates to apply for a business grant. That was from Marvin. Effectively, would need to be that there are changes and additional grants that we will cover off on, and the cut-off costs for wages was 10 million. It doesn't include on costs. It was just purely wages, not on costs. So, in addition to the micro business grant for individuals, Steve, talk us through.
Okay, for individuals, this is one that's actually handled by Service New South Wales, Service Australia, and is basically done through your MyGov account. You'll have to have a MyGov account. You'll have to link MyGov to Centrelink to be able to get this one. It's for people who have lost hours as an employee primarily, where they haven't been able to attend work as a result of stand downs, as a result of being in a COVID lockdown area, whatever the reasons. I mean, it's obviously related to the COVID situation. For people that are losing 8 hours or up to 20 hours in a week, they can get $375. For people that are losing 20 hours or more, it's $600. Now, this is a weekly claim that you have to lodge weekly up until the week commencing the 18th of July, in other words, this week. Then when you lodge this week's claim, there should be a question in the system that says, are your circumstances going to remain the same? And if you wish, you can elect to have the payment automatically recurring. There are some strange quirks in the system as to it's, as I said, 8 hours, but it can be 8 hours or a full day. And a full day, in some cases, people work 7.5 hours or 7 hours. The other thing a full day is defined of in the legislation is a casual shift. So a casual who gets 3 hours potentially has lost a full day for the purpose of this application. As I said, again, you've got to go through Services New South Wales in your MyGov account, and that will be available. It's payments, once you get through the system, the payments are occurring very quickly. I knew somebody who lodged a claim on Sunday afternoon, and they had their money in their account. Not only was it the claim processed, but the money was in their account within an hour.
Yeah, that was a similar experience. Steve, there's a question here from Casey, which I think is going to come up for a lot. Is now with the individual COVID relief for businesses or for people that are working in businesses, are they going to be able to look at both a claim under this and potentially under the other support measures we're about to discuss?
Potentially they could, if they don't elect to go for JobSaver, which we haven't discussed as yet. Then potentially, if their business they couldn't afford to pay their wages, they could claim this one. However, there is the other option of JobSaver, which we will discuss as a separate issue. You won't get JobSaver and a COVID disaster payment, but you would get the $15,000 grant, and then either a disaster payment or JobSaver.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Now, we've been mentioning JobSaver, and now we're going to talk about that a little bit more, more depth. Steve.
JobSaver is a nice way of saying we're not going to reinstate JobKeeper officially, but we're going to reinstate it through the back door. JobKeeper, as you may recall from the last lockdown, was administered by the tax office. JobSaver is administered by Service New South Wales, and it's been jointly funded by the state government and the federal government. What the basic terms of JobSaver are is where you have a revenue decline of 30% or more, the state and federal government will subsidise your payroll up to a minimum of, well, with a minimum of $1,500 a week and up to a maximum of $10,000 a week, where they will pay 40% of your payroll. Non-employing businesses such as trusts and tradies, they can get a payment of $1,000 a week. This is one that basically will continue until the current lockdown restrictions are eased or a Commonwealth hotspot declaration is removed. Again, applications are not yet open. They open in late July, and I would suggest you register your interest on the Service New South Wales.
Yeah, so the devil may well be in the detail a little bit in this. I've had an interesting question from Paul, who's flagged that what if your headcount in a job, an employee has resigned after the 13th of July, so you're not meeting their headcount? Good
question, Paul, and the answer is that has actually been dealt with. Your headcount is deemed to remain the same, providing the employee leaves voluntarily.
Yeah, so effectively, that's one that I suspect that they'll have a closer look at if that comes up. But thanks, Steve. Now, in addition to the state government support matters, there have been various other support measures. These still remain on foot if you haven't claimed and used them. I'd like to throw to Steve, and he can talk through some of the ones that we haven't already covered off.
Okay, I will just flag that at the back of the document you'll get, there is a 4-page summary issued by Service New South Wales that covers a lot of these. The main ones that we want to talk about tonight are the small business fees and charges rebate and payroll tax support. I'll go to payroll tax support first. The payroll tax, well, Service New South Wales and Office of State Revenue has offered a 25% reduction in payroll tax where you qualify as this 30% decline in turnover. That is for businesses with wages up to $10 million.
Yeah, so that's a 25% reduction in your payroll tax bill that you otherwise would have had.
That's correct. Businesses can also opt to delay payment on the 2021 annual reconciliation return. That doesn't have to be lodged now. Normally it's the 28th of July. It now doesn't have to be lodged until the 7th of October. Additionally, the payments that were due on the 7th of August and the 7th of September for the July and August wages are now deferred until the 7th of October as well. The other thing that is in here is that the Office of State Revenue is offering interest-free repayment plans of up to 12 months.
Yeah, so basically what that means is if last year's payroll tax effectively, you've got some time to pay and time to square up.
Yep.
And the current year's payroll tax, if you're down in turnover, you'll be paying 25% less of your ultimate payroll tax bill.
Yep. And yes, the deferrals themselves, they're available to all businesses. It's only the 25 reduction that requires the 30% reduction in turnover.
Okay, so I've just got another couple of questions from the floor, Steve, which we might knock off while we've got the opportunity. Kim has asked, is JobSaver on top of the business grant?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
And they're representing slightly different periods, but effectively it's on top.
Yep.
And Paula has asked, is fortnightly, weekly support available for sole traders? And the answer is?
That goes back to the micro business grant, $1,500 per fortnight. Sole traders would also, if they don't qualify for that one, would qualify for the, sorry, I've just got so many grants floating in front of me. I've got to remember the disaster payment.
Yeah, so effectively they're going to be either the micro business or if they're over the $75,000, they're going to tick that box.
Or again, also, there's so many options. You could also possibly qualify for JobSaver. You've got to look at the various options available, but certainly yes.
At the end of the day, it's an absolute time where you need to be working closely with your advisors and making sure that you are making the right decisions and making the right applications. And if you haven't got someone you can talk to, our team is always happy there to help and help you get through and make sure you're not losing out. Rent support, Steve. Now this is a slightly different area.
It is. Sorry, this is one I did want to touch on. At the moment, the grants are not particularly generous, and we're flagging that there's probably more to come on this one. What they have made available is a $1,500 grant for residential landlords who aren't liable to pay land tax, and who reduce their rent for tenants by up to $1,500. So it's a dollar for dollar up to that $1,500. And so if there's a circumstance where your tenant says, look, I'm a bit scrapped, you could possibly come up with an arrangement where you cut their rent and the state government subsidises you. For organisations, landlords that are registered for land tax, excuse me, basically the Office of State Revenue is offering you a land tax reduction equal to up to 100% of the land tax liability for the 21 year for any rent that you forgo, basically, and that's for commercial, residential or retail tenants. The other thing that you need to be aware of if you are a landlord is they have reintroduced rules about eviction, and you need to be very careful there. Basically, you can't throw out a cash-strapped tenant without a degree of mediation, and in some cases it's pretty much you can't do it.
You may recall previously from the JobKeeper and the first original support measures that were brought in place, that the rental support issue and the dealing of the commercial relationship between landlords and lessees was a complex matter and was one of the last components that they were to introduce. Now, at the moment, I believe they're probably hoping that was not going to have to be dealt with because the lockdown was not going to be too short to actually facilitate that. However, the longer the loose lockdown drags on, the more likely they're going to be to actually have to deal with this. I suspect if you are a tenant, it would be a great opportunity to actually have a chat to your landlord, pass on your concerns and where you are, and look to actively have a strong working relationship with them. Likewise, if you're a landlord, you should be working with your tenant to actually see, making sure that he's aware of or she's aware of the support that is actually out there and trying to negotiate the best outcome. Now, you may recall previously there were 50% rent withdrawal, under previous arrangements it was a 50% rent reduction and a 25% deferral. At this stage, we can't give any more guidance than to say work closely with your landlord or your lessee to make sure that you're getting the best possible outcome. It's very tough for businesses that are accruing rental liabilities at the same time as they've been forced to close their doors. And I think that's why we'll just have to watch this space as there's the process drags on a little bit further, unfortunately.
And yeah, given the numbers that came out in today's press release, where there were, I think, 41 people actively in the community while infectious, Gladys is basically hedging her bets as to whether that lockdown is going to finish at the end of July or not. if those numbers don't come down, we're going to see a further extension on those lockdowns.
We've got some further questions from the floor. Again, Paul, the grant for landlords is a once-off payment.
Yes.
The answer is yes. There's a great question here from an anonymous attendee. This is going to be one of these ones I think we're going to have to take under advice. We don't have the detail yet, but I'll ask Steve, the expert, anyway. My business has a lead time between initial contact with a client and actual sale between 6 to 12 weeks. So I do not have a 30% reduction in turnover now, but the actual during the actual shutdown, but possibly could have in 6 to 12 weeks time. So where does that leave him? Now, at the moment, I'm not sure that we can tell him much more.
No, at face value, the answer is that you haven't got a drop in turnover at the moment. However, officers that I keep saying Office of State Revenue. If I say that, please take me to mean Service New South Wales. Service New South Wales has indicated that if you have extenuating circumstances or a unique business, a new business, or the period that you're doing your comparison is not necessarily representative, you need to call them. Yeah,
and the calls, as we know, it's already been in the press and we know quite extensively here, the last 2 days, basically, the call waiting times are exceptional. There's not a lot we can do about that, but the only way you're going to be able to deal constructively with it is to get on the phone with the Department of Fair Trade. And we have seen that they are looking for ways to actually be as helpful as they can. So they're not looking to be difficult, but these various scenarios, to be honest, they're still working the rules out themselves.
Yeah, the online applications that are available are very much cookie cutter, standardised document, and wherever there is a unique circumstance, they're not designed to cover that online. Therefore, yes, you will have to talk to an officer of Service New South Wales.
Steve has asked who do we contact at Service New South Wales. I think it's in the materials.
It's in the materials. There's basically a whole heap of numbers and those sort of things.
So effectively, you'll be able to do that. So we might jump to bank support. This was basically hot off the presses there this morning, and I put a screenshot on there as it relates to the 4 major banks. It's fair to say that, again, all the banks have, or the major banks in any case, have been quick to offer support and moratoriums in payments and/or reduced payments and/or basically forestoring any foreclosures. So basically, my suggestion would be whatever bank you're with, jump onto their various website, apply for hardship relief quickly, be upfront with the banks. They're not going to be looking for ways to actually create problems for you. They are going to be looking to work constructively with you. They don't want bad debts on their books. They were in a healthy position prior to this lockdown, so they're going to be looking to help you manage the way they don't want the problem themselves too. So a bit like the discussion we had previously with landlords and tenants, you need to be working constructively with your bank to work through any issues that you have. Remember, cash flow is going to be very critical. If you haven't got a cash flow budget, or you need help making those sort of decisions about what you should be doing next, again, your advisor should be your first port of call to help you out in that space.
I might just jump back to one more state government support. This one actually came out in April, but I'm still finding that a lot of people haven't taken it, which is the small business fees and charges rebate. Now, that is a up to $1,500 grant by the state government. There is not a turnover drop requirement on this one. It is for businesses that have turnover greater than $75,000 and a payroll of less than $1.2 million. What you can do is you can apply, and they will basically give you a refund for several state government fees, up to $1,500. That runs from now until June 22. You know, if you've got a car in your business and you pay car reg, you can get that back. So worthwhile looking at. It's not a huge number, but $1,500 in your hand is better than $1,500 in the government's.
Now, I've got some great questions here as well too, Steve, which is we'll do our best to answer. Ebony has asked a question, does bank deferrals affect your credit rating like super withdrawals?
No, it's it's an offer by the banks that they're basically looking at the circumstances, and they will.
It won't be a negative mark on your credit file.
No.
It's beyond your control, which is why they've brought these measures to the forefront. Andrew has asked, are you expecting further grants to come for businesses in the construction industry? That will be a massive turnaround in revenue until we can return back to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The simple fact of the matter is that we haven't seen anything. That cut-off of the 13th of July and the 17th of July is basically before the building industry was shut down. There's going to have to be something, but they haven't yet addressed that one.
Yeah, it's not possible because they've shut down after that date. So they are going to have to revisit what they're offering in that space.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard from people who are pretty well connected that they've said that the construction industry won't be shut down for up until any longer than the 31st of July, by hook or by crook. But that's only scuttlebutt, and there's nothing that I can point to legislatively that says that's going to be the case. So I suspect there'll be more support that does come out for the construction industry if the closure drags any longer than much more than a week, because it's going to have a huge impact, and we all know that, particularly in our business here. And the Central Coast is largely driven by a lot of tradies. So, some more questions, Steve. Can you claim disaster payment until 18th of July, then JobSaver after that?
I believe so, because disaster payment is a situation where it's lodged weekly. The question in terms of whether you would be doing that, though, is does that mean you're being reinstated in a position? Because JobSaver is really for the employer. Disaster payment is for the employee.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. We might just keep pushing on and just start talking about, okay, given what we're facing at the moment, some of the questions that have come up we will deal with some of these components. But basically, it's absolutely essential now that you are getting professional advice and you are making sure that you're following the rules that are inherent. And some of the questions I've had here relate to casual employees and options for what you can do with employees and what you can't. Now's a great time if you do have some downtime in terms of not being able to work what you ordinarily would be, just to make sure that your HR and team resources are in place. If you haven't got your contracts and your documentation the way that they should be, now would be a great opportunity to get that tidied up. And there are cost-effective ways that we can help in that space. Look at your reduce and defer your taxes. We have covered off on some of those options there at present. If you haven't got a cash flow budget, absolutely essential that you look at cash flow and be really conscious about how that's going to play out in the next period as we then move back post-lockdown, because the cash flow issues will drag on longer than perhaps the lockdown will. You need to be able to hit the ground running when you can get back to work. If you need help being able to produce those cash flows, again, we're more than happy to help out in that space. It's something we do very regularly with our clients. If you don't understand the stimulus packages, make sure that you are registering and you are talking to your accountant and or advisor to make sure that you are getting the support you need. If you need to do your BASs, etc., don't run from those now. It's absolutely essential that you stay up to date with your reporting. COVID and the relief packages have all been driven largely by people making sure that they're reporting their BASs and their payroll on a regular basis. If you're not able to do that, or you need some help to do that, please take some action. Steve, if you are in a fortunate position to be able to use the downtime constructively and perhaps refit some equipment, etc., the budgets and the accelerated deductions, they're still there?
Yeah, accelerated depreciation runs for the next 12 months, so it's a great opportunity to get some capital equipment in there and pretty much write it straight off.
So effectively, if you are, I'm going to say, the fortunate position of having some tax liabilities or likely tax liabilities, then there are some incentives there that can help reduce those quite substantially in this next 12 months. If you haven't already got a documented business survival plan, now's a great time to actually start implementing that. And again, we've flagged there might be further changes that are coming with further announcements and a drag on with the lockdown. If you recall, before people were able to access super and things like that, I suspect that could well be on the cards if this thing drags out much longer. If that does, it's a great opportunity to sit back and look at where you sit at the moment personally and making sure that you have got a financial plan that can get you through that space. So I've just got some questions which we haven't signed off on, Stephen. I'm conscious of time, and as I alluded to, it's likely we're going to run over. We're slightly over, but we're almost there. So if you have other commitments, I understand if you do have to go, but we will do our best to square off as quickly as we can. I've got some questions. Small business fees and charges rebate, is this a one-off 1,500 rebate?
It's a one-off in the sense of you can only apply for it once, but for example, if your car rego was $500, you could claim the $500 and then claim a further expense at a later time. Once you've been granted that $1,500, you have until the 30th of June to claim it, but it can be multiple claims.
Yeah, so it can be multiple fees and charges. It doesn't have to be the one charge up front.
That's correct.
Excellent. Great, Steve. If a staff claim disaster payment from the first week of Centrelink, can a business claim JobSaver from the second week?
If the business has got them back on the payroll, yeah.
Yeah. So, we've got a question from Chris. New business with no prior year trading. What's happening?
Basically, new business with prior year trading, again, unfortunately, you've got to get onto the phone and talk to Service New South Wales. They have cited that one as a specific circumstance. What you are going to need to demonstrate, though, is that your circumstances would be that you would get to the $75,000 threshold.
Yeah. So they want to understand that you are going to be a legitimate business, basically, and prove that you were going to be. They will ask you questions and give you documentation or items of documentation you can provide to help get that one across the line. So thank you for your question there, Chris. So we're coming to the conclusion of our presentation there tonight. So basically, following the presentation, you will receive a copy of the slides in a feedback form. Once you complete the feedback form, you will be able to download the presentation itself, which will have the links and the material that we've talked about. Please, we do appreciate the feedback, both good and bad, and we do modify our messages that we give to the wider community on the back end of that feedback. So it also gives you the chance, if you're not already working extensively with us, to flag a time to have a chat to our one of our specialists or one of our key team members, where we can see where perhaps we can help and get you the support that you're looking for. So really, in conclusion, tonight, I'm going to give the accountant's disclaimer. Wouldn't be an accountant's presentation without having the disclaimer. Again, general concepts, more than happy to deal with your individual needs, etc. I'm leaving the questions open there for another couple of moments, but while I'm doing so, I'd like to thank Steve in particular for his efforts in this space. We've had a very short period of time to get on top of all of this. Steve is helping out our team no end in that space, and he's also come in and presented tonight. Probably when he should, he's had some challenges that perhaps. Personally, I would really appreciate you coming in and helping us out. So, questions that have come through. I don't think we've got anything open there that I haven't covered off? Again, if I haven't covered things off there at present, more than happy to deal with any unanswered questions that we've had from this presentation following tonight. So, on behalf of AdviceGo and more generally, please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for attending. I think small business is the salt of the earth, so keep struggling, and I hope you're getting through and surviving this in the best possible way. So, on behalf of AdviceGo, thanks very much for your attendance.